We'll call to order the meeting of the Dickinson Planning and Zoning Commission, October 17th, 2018. We have a short agenda today, but we should get a motion to approve that agenda as it has been presented.
I'll make a motion to approve that.
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. We have minutes from our last meeting, which was 3 months ago now. Any corrections or additions to the minutes? If not, we need a motion to approve.
Motion to approve minutes of previous session as written.
Second.
Motion is second. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Okay, we have no action items today on our agenda, but we do have a couple of discussion items, and I think Mr. Josephson is probably going to lead us through those.
Morning.
Looks like he's still mobilizing for the day.
Chairman Jackson, I believe that Stephen will start on the on-site parking. The Chapter 39 was a collaborative effort with the city attorney.
Yes, right.
They're not completed at this point.
Okay.
That's right, Chairman. Chairman Jackson, that was, we were going to have that and some other proposed amendments, and the city attorney is currently reviewing those. So after her review, we'll bring that forward for discussion. What we wanted to talk about was the idea of alternate on-site parking, and this is something that's in this coming year, as you may have seen from the well, as you'll see in the work program, that'll be the next item. One of the things that staff is going to look at is the entire Article 39, the zoning code, and including the section on off-street parking. There has been a trend in the country of looking at city codes in terms of off-street parking. There have been issues, particularly in downtown areas, with the minimums that are the minimum parking requirements that are in several codes around zoning codes around the country. Now, that was something that was developed for most of these. It comes from an engineering manual that was developed several decades ago. And the idea is with the off-site parking is based upon the use of a building. A certain number of spaces, a minimum number of spaces are assigned either based on square footage of the building, number of employees, in the case of restaurants, customers or tables, and so on. And one of the things that a number of cities are finding is that especially in downtown areas, that that if new businesses come in or businesses expand, it means acquiring properties that are already developed and demolishing those buildings to make make room for required parking, and also in the case of new development of creating parking lots where except on rare occasions, even at peak hours, parking is, the parking lots are not completely filled. It's expensive to the developers, and there's also a cost. The cost because there's land that's not being used that could be used for potential development. And what a number of cities have looked at, you have in front of you a memo that just summarizes. It summarizes a couple of programs that we've looked at in North Dakota, where cities allow for some sort of a alternative to the minimum parking, and they're usually based upon some sort of a study that some sort of a market study that's presented by the developer to city staff. And in the case of Fargo's is a lot more detailed of the ones that we found here. They will allow both an administrative reduction or one that goes to Planning and Zoning Commission for approval depending upon the threshold. And the study is accompanied as part of it. They'll also ask for certain things, certain sort of traffic demand, parking, traffic demand measures, such as having different employees coming in at different shifts, encouraging things like ride sharing, and other ways to cut down on trips. And what happens is, with the approval, is the city and the applicant actually enter into an agreement that the city will relax its minimums and reduce the number of parking that's required in exchange for them doing things, doing some things that that will encourage people to maybe drive less, or to carpool or whatever. We found that in the case of the city, I believe it's the city of Williston, actually has they have a program where if you have a study and you present that to the city, that the Planning and Zoning Commission can also reduce the minimums. But that's something I just wanted. I'm sure that a number of you are aware of this issue. This has been talked about, especially in the Strong Towns movement for the last few years, that perhaps the current city codes are requiring more parking than actually off-site parking than actually required. That the off-site parking is actually a disincentive for development, and that just wanted to let you know that as we go through the process of amending our code, that this is one of the things that we're going to look at. So this is an introduction into that topic, and I know that the Planning Director Hadley has some additional comments that he wants to add to this. But just wanted to present this memo so that when this issue comes up, as we amend the code, it'll be something to think about, and you'll be familiar with it. At this time, we're not necessarily proposing, how to reduce parking, but just to make you aware of a couple of things that are being done in North Dakota, and also the fact that we are looking at a nationwide issue.
Thank you, Steve.
Well, we are going to, if you want to do this, we're going to bring it back to you. PUDs would also allow the reduction. And then we'd like you to look around town to the different places that obviously have too much parking, too. The mall. There's some examples of places that we've required too many parking stalls. And I was going to grab, I think I could grab a, I think we have a map that shows that. I'll probably go grab that. Stephen, you could go through the timeline of when we would actually go through this. Probably bring it in the next month or so back if they want to discuss it further, and then we could have examples of time frames and when we could actually do this and get it on a hearing. It's a little cumbersome. So.
Any reaction?
Chairman, we're just addressing general commercial, not downtown.
Right.
And that's the map you want to.
Correct. That's
like
correct.
to see what
Yep.
how far off it.
I was going to grab that, and I didn't. So I will grab it.
Mr. Chairman, I guess my only comment would be, if while we're going through this is, and I guess I'd wait for Mr. Hadley to get back, is if we're going to also, as part of it being comprehensive, look at some alternatives to downtown too. And what could be adjusted there. And if Mr. Josephson and Mr. Hadley could bring us something there at the same time.
Yeah, and Commissioner Decker, just to let you know, a lot of the downtown that's zoned downtown commercial doesn't require minimums. However, as we've seen, not everything in the downtown area is zoned downtown commercial. We have some general commercial, and in cases like that, we have seen cases where businesses have expanded and acquired, buildings downtown and tore them down so that they could meet, those minimums. So yes, we'll look at, if it's a matter of just restricting it to a certain area of the city, or saying overall, if a developer comes in, or if somebody wants to take over a building and change the use and say, the requirements you have, we know that we're going to have far fewer customers than this, and they can produce a study for it. We at least have that opportunity to do so.
I know when the governor was in town for the tour last year, he made comments about certain areas of town, and one area of town that he thought that was done right is that in the old Saks parking lot, how that building was built, and the parking was behind the building, and opposed to, he made a note immediately of the White's building, the old, the new White Drug downtown, how that was the opposite. And I'm sure that they fell into that requirement. They had to have X amount of parking spots at White's because of their square footage. So I do appreciate that we're gonna look at this, and it probably will benefit us as a whole. We have this comprehensive plan, parking plan.
For instance, I mean, you can drive by there almost any time of the day and maybe see 2 cars in that whole parking lot, We better wait.
Walt should be hearing these comments.
Even the White Drug up north.
Yeah, exactly,
There are so many examples, so many.
Those drugstores, they have that pickup. That's where people go through the window.
But they also had to meet that requirement too, so that's why the parking lots are generally built
Right.
the way they are.
I think, Mr. Hadley, some of the early comments that you missed are very much in favor of looking at this. I have always thought that what we do with big boxes, I mean, most communities, what we do with big boxes, malls, is just a shame. It's just a shame. It affects stormwater runoff so much when you're oversizing these parking lots. You're putting all that fast water into your storm system.
I never
There's
thought,
so
I never
many
thought
reasons.
about that, yeah.
Absolutely. It's just not a good thing. I really think this is good, that we need to look at this, and I think we need to reduce the requirements, however we do it, whatever the detail of that is. I would go further and say that whether it's the mall or Walmart, or, you could pick a lot of examples. If they want to convert some of that space to an outlot and sell and get another building up, great.
Much like the mall did now.
To me, it's a kind of infill to do that.
I agree.
So full speed ahead as far as I'm concerned.
Okay, when we're going to come back with this, I mean, we're going to get ready to start a comprehensive review of the zoning code, starting at the beginning of the year. And certainly we can put this, push this up, as one of the parts that we can start looking at first or early on. But there are a number of things in the zoning code that more than likely need updating too, and at least having a process in here to allow people to reduce those minimums, something they can go through. As I said, this is part of a national trend.
I'm not, I want to be careful saying this, but maybe at the same time, at least for those large properties, maybe at the same time we look at green space requirements or buffer requirements or something. I would never think it should be a one-to-one thing or anything, but
And we do have that on this list too. So yeah, we could look at that at the same time.
but maybe, in other words, we can reduce parking, and maybe we add a little, some kind of open space or something that's not hard surfaced. Not sure about that, but
My only concern there is the upkeep.
yeah, absolutely.
These big commercial businesses, especially like the big shops, or we require trees and grass, they never mow it, or they don't water it.
Some do, but plenty don't.
Yeah,
Anything more on that for now? Okay, and then Walt, you wanted to look at,
Yeah, I think what we'll do is maybe Stephen put this list together. Maybe Stephen can go down the list, the things that he and I both do, are working on together. He can kind of summarize explain what is going on in each one of those projects. And then the goal on this is to give you an idea of what we have on a list of projects. It'd be great to prioritize these. I think there's a few of these, we're talking about the overlay district with DSU, we may move that up on the list. So we'd like to get a little direction and interest from your group as to where you would like those projects. Right now you have kind of a list of we just put it together. So Stephen,
okay,
if you wouldn't mind just going through those individually, and then we can have a discussion, or if you want to start and look at the list and
okay. Before we start, I'm seeing probably, 40 or 50 items here. How are you going to go through those so they're not 5 minutes apiece?
I think we could hit the highlights, okay, and let you know some things that are underway. And this is a general guide. Of course, things are going to move up and new things are going to pop up on this as events go along. One of the things we're working on with the change to the downtown commercial zoning is it's a recommended design manual of guidelines when the developers come in, and under those new guidelines, how to lay out their buildings and so on. And that's underway. We have been talking to President Mitzel at Dickinson State University about a university overlay district. One of the first things we want to do is meet with the Student Association. We're putting together a PowerPoint presentation with them, get some sense of what they're looking for in terms of kinds of business. But we also want to meet with the affect people, tell the owners in the affected area of what's coming up before bringing that to planning and zoning for information and public hearing. One of the things that's under
Chairman?
Yes.
Well, before you move on, with the downtown design guidelines, are we going to be so restrictive that we're just making these buildings homogenized, that they all look like one another?
No, it's more suggestive. It's more suggestive in nature.
right, they're guidelines or options of things you could do that fit the criteria of the general direction of the historic type theme, or if it's not a historic building, then no, it wouldn't be that.
Because I know there's one new building that's possibly going to get built soon.
Yep.
And then there's another group looking to
Yep.
either renovate or build another building. And I don't want to be restrictive. I mean, I want them to have their uniqueness, that we're not saying this is the only way you can look.
And they've looked at our standards right now, and they don't have a problem with the guidelines that we have, and really all we're doing is cleaning those up. So the buildings that are planned to be built are already designed for that direction.
Yeah, this is going to be more helpful in suggestions, and it's not, this is how you're going to do it.
Okay. And then with the university overlay, for me, priority-wise, I would like to see that for you gentlemen to move upward, because there's a lot of interest right now. I've been contacted by multiple people that are very interested in that area, because there's a lot of property for sale in that area, and they're looking at it as opportunities to create that corridor between DSU and the downtown, which I think we wanted to do with the Renaissance Zone. My question, though, is there's a lot of talk about the Renaissance Zone. Have you gentlemen heard anything about that not being renewed dollar-wise?
I haven't.
I haven't either. I haven't heard any sort of, you mean in terms of the legislation of it? No, I haven't heard anything either. And you never know what's going to happen when the legislature
Well,
meets.
that's why I'm saying we maybe need to move this up if there are people that can take opportunity while the Renaissance is, that we know that it exists, there's no changes, and get this overlay district information out so that we can move forward. Like I said, there's a lot of buildings for sale in that corridor right now. And there's a lot of interest in between DSU and the downtown. People want to get into that position. And I've been, on one building alone, I've been approached by 4 different people. And it's zoned right now, it's zoned residential. It will never be residential. It's just the truth about it. That building will never be residential. So if there's some other opportunity, it needs to be taken. Otherwise, it's just going to sit there and eventually fall into a state of disrepair, and then we have another building that may come down. So I'd rather see somebody in it, operating in it, than just another empty building.
We are waiting with DSU to respond, to coordinate with the students so we can meet and actually get what their views are, is what they wanted. Kind of services along that corridor as well. So that's one thing that's holding us up a little bit. But other than that, we can definitely push it forward.
It is in this quarter, so it's something I've been actively working on. Let's see. We're hoping to bring back revisions to the subdivision ordinance, and we've been working with engineering department on that. We had talked about the parking minimums, the parking minimums, and as I said, we're going to roll that in with the update to the zoning ordinance. And then there are a number of these things that Walter has been working on that he may be able to elaborate on. But going into 2019, we're looking at working with the city attorney on changes to Chapter 39, the zoning, reviewing it and proposing changes to it. And that's a long-term project. That's not something that can be done in a quarter. It's going to probably take at least a year to go through that and work with planning and zoning, and have public hearings on it. We're also looking at developing a highway commercial zoning district per what's in the West Dickinson plan, and that would be primarily along the I-94 exits. We kind of have a model for that. There was a zoning that was done with Roars a number of years ago that outlined the number of uses that would be, that you would encourage at those kinds of locations. We're also going to give an update report on the comprehensive plan. I think one of the things we need to look at in our comprehensive plan is the mixed use land use category. We're finding that there are some places that it's perhaps not appropriate. I know that the intent of it was to have, you wouldn't necessarily in areas have all strip development and you wouldn't have all residential development, that you would have mixed projects where it'd be primarily residential with commercial supporting it. And we're finding that the reality is that there are certain areas in the city, in the extraterritorial zone, where it's not working out that way, and it's not appropriate. Let's see. So, I think those are some of the major projects. We may look at a historic preservation plan for the city, but that's work with the museum on that. But that's something else that's off in the future. Also, the other thing we need to do is extend the period of our Renaissance zone, and we're going to start up on that because it actually expires next July. So we'll need to bring that back for public hearing. At this point, because the census hasn't been done yet, we can't add any more blocks to it. So this would just be bringing it back and saying the state allows extending it out in 5-year increments. So that you will probably see that coming to planning and zoning in the near future. And Walter, are there any other projects on here that you wish to? I think those are the highlights, rather than going through the whole thing. I think those are the highlights. Those are the highlights of projects that we're working on. Is there anything else you wish to add, Walter?
Not really, thank you, Stephen. Yeah, you know, the coordination of like the downtown square and civic center discussions and downtown improvement stuff that is going on. Obviously, we put that on the list just because that is wound up taking a lot of time to try to coordinate. And so it's just something that this commission should be aware of, that is something that's going on and actively being moved forward. This year, we haven't even finished the downtown tree and lighting plan. It should be finished this week, hopefully. So it's kind of a coordination effort. So Stephen put together a lot of this list. I think he did a good job. What we're really looking for is direction, like with the DSU stuff. We will move that up toward the top. We'd like to hear if there's other projects that you would like to see moved to the top, or maybe projects that you, on the cursory, you're not that excited about. So, you know, we're kind of bringing those to you to get some direction, so we don't wind up coming in 2 or 3 months and you guys wonder why we're talking about it.
The one that sticks out to me is the sign code enforcement amendments. When I got on this commission, we spent over a year rewriting the sign code. What are we looking at doing there again?
We're just looking at it to see if there's any glitches in there that need to be cleaned up, that's all.
See, that's an example. You know, I assume that and probably many, many other things are things that you guys are doing ongoing. That's your job. You're living with this stuff day to day. So when you see something, whether it's parking requirements or sign code or whatever, you know, I think we assume that you guys are always looking at that. And I remember a while back, I think we encouraged you guys that when you see something in the code that you think needs fixing, let's do it. Let's get after it, you know.
Right, no, I can assure you there's no major rewrites
Yeah,
of the
it
sign
seems
code
like
coming.
it seems like you're doing that.
Yeah.
To me, you know, I think this is the first time we've seen this list, isn't it? Yeah. Okay. There's a lot here. I think with a lot of this, it would be hard for us to put a priority on.
Mr. Chairman, the one thing that I'd like to mention too is, and I think we need to address this, even if Measure 3 doesn't pass in the next 20 days, which is the recreational marijuana, I think we need to, I don't think this is the last time we're going to hear about it. So I think that the gentleman, Mr. Hadley and Mr. Josephson, I think that should be something they can put on their list for down the road, just to maybe even as an amendment to the medical marijuana.
Yeah. And
I think we really need to look at that, because
You're saying zoning aspects, Scott?
yes, the zoning aspects, you know, if recreational passes, that's a whole different ballgame for us as a city on what we're going to do. And I'm sure Mrs. Murtha is, we're gonna have to address it just even beyond zoning, licensing, and other things that the city needs to regulate. So,
And Commissioners, we do have that on the second page.
is it?
Yeah, we have possible revised medical marijuana ordinance pending November
Okay.
election, so yes.
Okay, well, I just saw
That's on our radar.
Okay, I just saw medical. I didn't see recreational. So.
Attorney Murtha and I have had some discussions already on it, and we will move forward if we need to.
I think it's right now it's a 50-50 on where it's going to go, so I think we need to
Prepare.
address it.
What do we think would have to happen for us to have anything close to the impact we had 5-6 years ago? The pace, the development, what would have to happen? I mean, I have an answer to that, but
I think 80
Drilling
up.
would have to move south.
that's what I think too. It'd have to be a new oil field. Yeah. I don't think we're going to see it unless some very significant.
You're saying a drop-off or a boom?
Boom.
Boom? I think if something happens in Saudi Arabia
Yeah.
here in the next couple weeks, few days, and, you know, they've threatened already that they push oil over $100 a barrel.
Yeah, I'm
Now,
not,
I don't know what that means for for out here, how quickly they would ramp up to try to meet demand and try to push that down, but
I think between Saudi Arabia and then the Permian Basin down in Texas, I think you'd have to see some. I mean, they're having problems getting employees down there. You know, the economy would have to go in the United States pretty bad, I think, then we have a lot more people, that these jobs are in a lot more demand and would be moving towards oil country.
you know, I ask it because I think 5, 6 years ago, we did a lot of things well, but we didn't do everything real well. And we need to keep that in mind as we do things like this. We have to learn from what we didn't do so well.
I think we can really promote some infill in some of this. I know that's been one of your priorities.
And it's
Okay.
happening. It's
Yeah.
happening at a pretty slow pace right now, but it's happening.
It's happening. I think the study that, you know, they did, the planning and Director Hadley did and Mr. Josephson on the empty lots, I think that's always helpful whenever we bring up that amount. People see that there is land available to develop.
You know, there are other issues, and we're digressing here, I guess, but, you know, our governor, I'm sure, would say that our streets are too wide. We made that decision a few years ago, and it was very deliberate, and there was a lot of thought that went into it. I've second-guessed it many times. But, you know, I drive around this town, and I see the percentage of pickups that we have, and the way the town is developed, and it is Dickinson, you know, it's not the East Coast. And I think I'm still okay with that decision. But many would criticize us for what we've done.
But I think as a planning and zoning commission and as the city commission, before some of us were on there, I think you guys took the right steps that were necessary at that time. And that's why we're not like other cities, $200 and $300 million in debt. And we're at where we're at, which is manageable. I do think, to Mr. Jackson's point, we are the West, and when we do parking lots, I know there's a big push out there for that 8-foot wide, or what's the minimum requirement for a parking space?
8, I think.
Is it 8? I know there are a lot of people would not be opposed to 10-foot wide parking spots.
Try to get an F-250 in an 8-foot
Right,
spot.
yeah.
Especially a Cashwise or something.
That's what I mean. I mean,
You know.
if you could, you know, I don't think there'd be anybody opposed to us.
You notice how a Costco does its parking lots?
I've
There
never
are spaces between each.
been. Is there? Yeah, I've never been to the Costco parking lot, so.
It really makes it nice, but you start
Use it
talking about
more.
stormwater runoff and things like that, it all adds. But, you know, my daughter lives in Boston, and when we go to Boston, you don't see very many Suburbans.
You know, I think in hindsight, if you look back at what was done, I mean, the only thing that we could probably look at is the annexation stuff that we brought in that probably wasn't necessary or should have rethought. And hopefully we can get some of that back out.
And I saw that was on the list. There's a couple.
And we were
spots.
constantly fighting the population projections.
Right.
Yeah,
That told us, you know, bottom end 35,000, top end 62, I think it was.
yeah.
We were fighting that the whole way.
Yeah, I mean, it's nothing you could do about it. It's just that you have big tracks now that are annexed in that nobody is going to ever follow through on probably. But
Back to the list. think it's good you have a list. I think it would take us a long time to second-guess your list, put priorities on it. I think the important thing is that you're looking at this stuff, and you guys and the rest of the staff, you know when you've got a hot-button item, and again, encourage you to get it going. Bring it to us, and let's do it. I think as you're rewriting the overall code, really try to keep it simple. Try to keep the redundancies out of it. You know, we used to have things in your development agreements, as an example, that every single development agreement had the same thing. Let's get in the code and not have to do that. in
Mr. Chairman,
development
not to, I guess, rehash an old issue, but I don't know what's on the agenda for November, but if this Measure 3 does pass, and this is, I guess, a question for City Attorney Murtha, there's provisions within that how quickly it has to be enacted. And I'm wondering how fast we have to react.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, there are provisions about it enacting, I think within, I'm going off of memory here, but it might be within 30 days. I will say that that there were similar provisions in the medical marijuana referendum, and yet due to various legal maneuverings, it went back to the legislature for reevaluation during that legislative session, so that it did not go into effect. I suspect that something similar could happen with this Measure 3 should it pass. I don't think it's something we can rely on, but I also believe that that there is an acknowledgement that there's a legal process and you can't enact an ordinance prior to the state law changing right about this, so that I think we'll have to act promptly, but as long as we do so in good faith, that there shouldn't be too much negative impact from not having something that's ready to go December 1st.
Like I said, I'm just concerned this passes and all of a sudden somebody sets up a shop immediately and says, hey, it says I can do it in 30 days.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think that's some of the press you're seeing out there in the opposition, that there's no control in 30 days. It's just going to be the Wild West, and I don't believe that that's the case. So,
I mean, just so we're looking at it, that we're not running into
I agree.
challenges.
It's going to be an interesting time for sure.
Anything else on this?
The only
For
thing
now.
I had to say was de-annexations. We are working on that for Sundance and Pinecrest, the parts that don't have infrastructure or platted. They're reverted back to agricultural zoning. So, and the owner is up for de-annexation of those portions of those. So we are moving that forward, even though it's on the list.
So what's that process? I
I'm
mean,
sorry, what?
if he wants it, I mean, does he just have to come here and?
Yep. Petition to the city commission. We probably would bring it to the planning commission. I don't believe there's a requirement that it comes to the planning commission, but we probably would bring it to the planning commission just for a general discussion and recommendation based on the fact that you folks made the recommendation to approve those developments initially.
Do you see that before the end of the year? Or
The what?
do you see that happening before the end of the year?
Doubtful for the end of the year.
Well, I mean, okay.
I visited
I mean,
them
if
2 months ago.
Oh, and he hasn't
I haven't
applied yet, or?
I haven't got any legals and all the stuff I need to move it forward. As soon as I get it, I can move it forward, but I know that they want to, but, you know, they're trying to find a surveyor and get the information put together and then bring it back into it, so.
Are you talking about the village, Sundance Village?
Over by Pinecrest.
Right.
The water tank, west of the water tank would be the area there, and then up where the mobile home court was planned, and then Sundance Village, which was just north of Sundance Cove.
Yeah.
Strip of ground. Those
That's
two,
300.
those two strips are
If you
about
look
the
at the
same
map,
size.
that
You can
big
see them sticking
the
out
east
on our
side,
map.
That big plot.
They are in Dickinson this week, so I'll just tell Mr. Hart to get a hold of you. You know, if it's
I
any
don't-
indication at all on how we're growing, we are ahead in the real estate industry right now of 2015 at this point. So 16 and 17 is
Shirley?
gone, but, pardon?
You said we are ahead of 2015?
15.
Okay.
15 was our last high year, and then on the 15th of December is when the oil prices dropped and everything came to a screeching halt, so. But this year has been very high.
I'll agree. I mean, it's a lot busier out there than it has been.
And then I have another question, Mr. Chairman. When I was on the commission, we had a property along State Edition on the south side, Hart River on the west side. They were going to build apartment buildings. If I can remember correctly, they had 3 years, and then if they didn't build those, it reverted back to residential. Is that true? Because I know we've had calls about people wanting to build and buy in that area.
Which area was that again? I'm sorry.
When you go over the overpass, and then you go past the greenhouse over there, that whole hill,
The west
On the
side of
west
States
side?
where those apartments were supposed to be.
I don't believe, I think a lot of the infrastructure is there, obviously the roads aren't in and all of that, but I'd probably say if it was a PUD, and I think it is, it probably reverts back to the original zoning as well.
so if I got a hold of the owners,
So they would have to come back in.
okay.
It's definitely doable because I think a lot of the facilities are already there.
Well, it's a beautiful area.
Yeah.
All right,
And
thank
even
you.
if it wasn't expired, even if it wasn't expired, they could still come in and amend it.
Okay, before we leave, our next meeting is scheduled for the day before Thanksgiving. Is that an issue for anybody?
Nope.
Is that going to work for everybody?
I'll be around.
Oh,
Okay.
I'd be around.
Okay, and Mr. Hadley said that we won't have any decision items, it doesn't look like. It's just going to be discussion items, whatever those may be. You know, I know we went 2 months without a meeting. I would still say I don't know how the rest of you feel. I'm not sure we should have a meeting just to have a meeting. If we've got something that you need us to do, absolutely, but
Well, Stephen, I mean, you're working on a couple of things that you probably will be ready. Stephen's doing a lot of amendments and moving all that stuff forward, so as he gets time and is able to do that, then that's when those are coming to you for the most part. So Stephen, I guess I would leave it, you know, to you too, if in November we would have enough to have a discussion on, for that meeting, to make it worth their while to come.
you know, one thing maybe I would ask, if we could do this at the next meeting, is where we all sit with terms. You know, do we have vacant seats now, or what vacant seats will we have at the end of the year? Could we check that? And
Okay.
I think-
I believe Brandy has that. Brandy is the keeper of all those. so she
The only one we're
probably
vacant
has
is
that.
ETZ. We don't have an
Right
ETZ
now.
representative right now.
yeah,
We've had that for as long as I can remember, so.
The ETZ?
Yeah.
Yeah, we haven't had them for years.
but
just
I know we have
mentioned
some
that to
terms
Dean, too.
that are up
Yeah.
in December.
Okay.
I did just mention that, to
I mean,
Dean. Maybe he can go back to the county and stir up somebody to come and serve, maybe. It would be nice to have a full complement, because then it also relieves some of you too, you know. Then you don't feel like every day, or if you miss one meeting, then it's not the end of the world. So.
Anything else? Not? Need a motion to adjourn?
So move.
Second.
We're adjourned.